In this lesson, we will discuss if, then, else if structures. The if, then, else structure only allows us to use one test condition to make decisions. Certain statements will be executed if the test condition is true, while other statements will be executed if the test condition is false. But in many real-world problems, we may need to have the option of taking many different actions based on multiple test conditions. For situations like these, we can use an if-then-else-if structure. In this type of structure, the program proceeds down the list of test conditions until a true test condition is found. Once a true test condition is found, the statements between that test condition and the next else if are executed. Then the program jumps to end if, ignoring the remaining test conditions even if some of them are also true. If none of the test conditions are true, the statements between else and end if will be executed. Although the else is optional, it allows your program to always take an action regardless if any of the test conditions are true. This program will help you decide where to eat dinner. If you have $25 or more, you'll eat at a fancy restaurant. If you have between $10 and $25, you'll eat at a fast food restaurant. And if you have between $0 and $10, you'll eat instant noodles. When we run the macro named eat, 3 message boxes appear. The first message box states before if structure. The second message box states eat at the fancy restaurant. And the third message box states after if structure. Let's examine how this if, then, else if structure works. The variable funds stores the amount of dollars that you currently have. Funds is given a double data type and assigned the value 26. A message box appears that states before if structure. Now we reach an if, then, else if structure. We evaluate the first test condition. Is funds greater than or equal to 25? Is 26 greater than or equal to 25? This is true, so we execute the statements between the if and else if. A message box displays eat at the fancy restaurant. After executing all the statements between the if and else if, we jump down to the end of the if, then, else if structure and ignore all test conditions even if they are true. Notice that the test condition, funds greater than 1, is true, but we ignore it because we already found a true test condition earlier in the if, then, else if structure. Finally, a message box states after if structure. Let's assign the value 7 to funds and rerun the macro. Again, 3 message boxes appear. The first message box states before if structure. The second message box states eat instant noodles. And the third message box states after if structure. After assigning the value 7 to funds, a message box will appear that states before if structure. And then we reach the if, then, else if structure and evaluate the first test condition. Is funds greater than or equal to 25? Is 7 greater than or equal to 25? This is false, so we ignore the statements between the if and else if and try the next test condition. Is funds greater than or equal to 10 and funds less than 25? False and true. Since at least one of the conditions is not true, the entire test condition is false. We ignore all the statements between this test condition and the next else if. We then reach the third test condition. Is funds greater than or equal to 0 and funds less than 10? True and true. Since both conditions are true, the entire test condition is true. And we execute all the statements between this test condition and the next else if. A message box will appear that states eat instant noodles. We then go to the end of the if-then-else-if structure, ignoring all other test conditions even if they are also true. Notice that the test condition funds greater than 1 is true, but we ignore it because we've already found a true test condition earlier in the if-then-else-if structure. Finally, a message box appears that states after if structure. Let's assign the value -1 to funds and rerun the macro. Three message boxes will appear, and the first message box will again state before if structure. The second message box states funds is an invalid number, and the third message box states after if structure. In this case, all 4 test conditions are false. When this happens, the statements between else and end if are executed. A message box displays funds is an invalid number, and the if structure is then terminated.